Welcome to the Psych Incubator and our series Eminent Psychotherapists Revealed. Before I introduce our guest, Dr. Nadine Kaslow, I just want to let people know that this is going to be the last program in our series. We started in 2021 and we've had a wonderful run. We've interviewed some of the most amazing people along the way. We still will have our recorded versions up online for you to look at and share with your students and your supervisees. So if you want to hear about some of the pioneering people in our times, go to Psych Incubator, Eminent Psychotherapists, and you can see the recorded version. And we're going to be starting with some new and exciting products that'll be interesting, I think, to people. That'll be a little different that we're going to be releasing soon. So I would like to take this opportunity to introduce Dr. Nadine Kaslow, who I have known for a couple decades now, and really excited to have Nadine with us and our co-host Jennifer Kelly. Both of them are past presidents of the American Psychological Association and have done a lot of work in our community to make our work better and make it more accessible. And we'll talk more about that when we get going. But I would like to say a little bit about Dr. Kaslow. She's a professor and vice chair for faculty development, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And she's the founder and director of the NIA Project at Emory University School of Medicine. We're going to really get into that with her tonight because it's really exciting. She received her doctorate in humane letters from Pepperdine University. She was, as I said, she was the 2014 president of the American Psychological Association and is a current member of the board of International Association of Applied Psychology Professional Practice Division. Past president of many, many divisions. I've served with her in many boards. Nadine is an amazing leader, very inspiring, does wonderful work, and has really had a great influence on the field. And I am so happy, Nadine, that you are taking the time to share what you're doing in your life and in your career now with us. So thank you for being our final. This is such a wonderful way for us to close our series. It's been a good run, 4 years.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. It's really an honor for me.
Well, thank you, Dr. Kaslow, Nadine, for being here. And I've known you for at least 3 decades, and it's good to have you not just as a colleague but as a friend as well. I'm very familiar with your project, the Neil Project, and this is your brainchild. And I know that this is something that we will be highlighting this evening. And I just want to get a little bit more information about it. But let me just give a little background about what the NEO Project is. The NEO Project's mission is to empower suicidal Black women with a history of adverse childhood experiences and/or intimate partner violence to be resilient and to flourish, to heal from their interpersonal traumas, to find purpose in their lives, and engage meaningfully within their communities. And of course, this is something that I truly believe in, that's near and dear to my heart. And I want to just, number one, thank you so much for taking this on. It is such an impactful program. And I know many people who have worked with the program, and it's been a life-changing experience for them. And so I just want to get from you, it's like, please share with the group here. Uh, Tell me where this came from, and how did you envision this, and how did you get it off the ground?
Sure. Well, Jennifer, it's really a pleasure to be talking with you, given our 3+ decades
Mhm.
of knowing each other and being friends, actually. Um, so I think that there are several things when I reflect on it that led to the development and 30 years, 31 years of the NIA project now. I guess it's 32. So early in my career, I had two patients die by suicide. One while I was a graduate student, and one who died by suicide the day I took my EPPP. And that was the day I received the letter when I came home from taking my EPPP to say that by the time I received this letter that she would be dead. And so I was really impacted by both of these losses, particularly the latter loss. And I think I really questioned whether or not I wanted to be a psychologist,
Mm-hmm.
whether I was any good at being a psychologist, whether I should work with suicidal people anymore. I mean, I really, really struggled.
Rocked your world.
And yeah, it was one of the worst things that's ever happened
Yeah,
to me
I can
professionally.
imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, and I was extremely attached to the second woman who died. And so I really struggled with that, and either was going to avoid it or, in true Nadine fashion, try to figure it out. And so when I moved to Atlanta and joined the faculty at Emory and working at Grady Hospital, which is a large inner city public safety net hospital, I decided to sort of switch my area of research and focus more on suicidal behavior in women and in Black women more specifically. And at that time, the CDC had a call for grants that were looking at sort of two forms of violence. You could pick any sort of two forms of intentional injury. And so my first grant funded by the CDC in the early 90s was on the link between intimate partner violence and suicide attempts in low-income African American women. And we did research on that topic. I had nowhere in my head the idea of a clinical program. We looked at risk factors that increased women's risk for attempting suicide if they were in an abusive intimate partnership, and protective factors that reduce their vulnerability to suicide attempts. And that was really the focus. And then one day I was in my office and a couple of women showed up at my office door. I had not met them. They were research participants. They had found my office. They were actually at a shelter together, figured out they'd been in the same research project, and wanted to know why we asked them so many questions about themselves and their suicidality and their domestic violence or intimate partner violence, childhood trauma, but we didn't offer them any support.
Wow.
And so I said, well, like, what do you think would help? I mean, I was standing sort of in the doorway talking to these strangers at that time. And they were like, well, a group, you should have a group. And we had just, some of our data had shown that actually social support was the biggest protective factor for these women. So they're saying a group, we've just found social support. And so I said, okay, that sounds like a good idea. What kind of group? And they said a support group for suicidal people. I said, okay. And so in 1993, we started a suicide support group on Mondays at 1. That group has run on Mondays at 1 o'clock since 1993. That's the one group I will not change the time of that one group.
And do you still run it?
Yeah, well, I don't run it. I have trainees that run it. And we had between 0 and 2 people came to that group for 6 months. And I cannot remember why I didn't give up on that group. But fast forward 30 plus years, we now have over 20 groups a week.
20?
Yes.
Wow.
Over 20 groups a week. If people who participate actively in the groups also get individual therapy. They can also have couples and family therapy. We have a crisis line. We have created a whole community of events that we can talk about. And all of these services are and have always been offered free of charge.
Oh, that's wonderful. You must feel so gratified to look back and see like where you started
Right.
and what achieved and what you've given back. That's just
Mhm.
really amazing, Nadine.
Thanks. I mean, I think what's been the most gratifying is I never think about it as what I've achieved, but what we as a community have achieved.
Yeah. Yeah.
The,
Mhm.
Well,
what's
they're the ones that sparked it, right?
they sparked
They
it.
hunted you down. They hunted you down and said, "You made us do all the stuff now. Cough
Take
up
care of
Which is,
some help
and I
for
think
us."
that's amazing in and of itself.
Yeah.
That they came to you and
it.
said, "We need some help,"
Yeah.
basically.
Right. We need some help. And so honestly, every step of the way, we need a group on this. Okay, we'll have a group on that. We need a group on this. Okay, we'll add a
Mhm.
group on that. This is what we need during COVID. Okay, let's see how we can get that. And that the women or the members of NIA have have a voice. I was joking before we started. They even vote on what pie we're going to have for Thanksgiving. Who wants pumpkin? Are we going to pumpkin or apple or pecan? Like, what are we going to do?
Can we have
Down
all of
to
them?
everything. What?
Can't we have all of them?
Well, we can have three different kinds of pie.
Okay, that works. So that's wonderful.
Mhm.
So tell Nadine, tell us in this journey that you've had to to build and provide a service to underserved people. So you learn things by doing them, right? What I would be really interested in, and I think would be great for the people that are going to watch this and are watching it, is what have you learned about building a system from the ground up? And not obviously one of the things I hear you saying is, don't give up.
Mhm.
But tell us more when you look back at where you were in 1990s and where you are now and where this what have you learned about building and nourishing and creating systems that work and add something and benefit people?
I mean, that's a great question. I mean, one of the things is a well-known woman politician once said it takes a village. And
Yes.
it really takes a village.
Yeah.
I cannot do this on my own. I believe at least the clinical and education director, Dr. Sarah Dunn, is on the call right now. There may be other members of the village here as well. And it takes a village to do this. A lot of persistence, collaboration, creativity. Many of the interventions that we offer now didn't even exist in 1992 or 1993. They didn't, you know, they didn't exist, or they certainly weren't in the mainstream at that time.
Mhm.
I learned a
But
lot about what.
when you went through periods of feeling demoralized and like, is this going to work? What did you do to keep yourself going?
Well, so it's been different at different times.
Mhm.
So NIA has been funded continuously by the CDC
Really?
since
Wow.
1991. We've also had
Wow.
grants from NIH and private
Wow.
foundations, but we've had continuous CDC funding since 1991 until August 1st, 2025, when I received a letter from the Office of Management and Budget telling me that adverse childhood experiences and suicide were not problems in our nation. And so,
You received a letter that actually said that?
yes.
Wow.
And so I wasn't sure how we were going to pay the bills, keep the lights on, those sorts of things. Fortunately, we have incredible senators in our state who really advocated for us, and we were we were able to get the funding restored. Um, but that was a time just last month that I
Right.
wasn't sure what was going to happen. But certainly there have been times where we haven't had, research grants don't pay for clinicians, and research grants don't pay for all of the things we provide for the members in the holiday parties and the Thanksgivings and all the resources for groups. And it's been really, really tight at times. And I think that, partly I have really a passion for this work, but I care deeply about the women in the
Mm,
program. Just, I think they're the ones that have kept me going.
mm.
They've inspired me.
Yeah. So Nadine, you've been with this project for over 30 years, and one of the things I'm curious about is like what's changed over time? Because
Mhm.
different things go on in the world and within the communities and with people. And so I'm curious as to what's changed over time with the program and what are the things that have been constants
Mhm.
in the program?
That's a really good question, Jennifer. So I would say the program, because it started with people coming to me, has always had been patient-centered. Um, I would say I've now come to appreciate going beyond patient-centered care to patient perspective care, in which it's not just that the patient is at the center, but that their perspective is really centered. And so it's not just we ask them what they want and they're part of decisions, but we often end up going with what they want. It might be different than what we think would be best. And an
Hmm.
example of that is during the pandemic, of course, all the team members, all the therapists wanted the patients to have their cameras on all the time. But, you're supposed to have therapy with your camera on. And the members didn't want to have their cameras on. And so they voted, and we had team meetings with the, community meetings with everybody talking. And at different phases of the pandemic and post-pandemic life, we've made different choices, but all in collaboration. So the patient's perspective has always been centered. We've always prioritized having a culturally responsive program. That has been true throughout. But what that looks like, it's much more nuanced now, for sure. So we added, for example, a spirituality group, probably about 20 years ago. For many of our patients or the members, spirituality is a very positive, adaptive coping strategy.
Mhm.
And so it's been important to add a spirituality group. We have a women of color exploration group, where people really look at their Black identities. Um, and so we've become much more intentional, both about the groups we have, but also how we infuse culture into every group. We've included an arts component now. We didn't have the arts integrated before. So Sarah Dunn, who's on the call, started a coping with trauma through art group probably a decade ago now. And that group has really flourished. But we've now expanded it to have an expressive arts group that has different forms of the arts. And interestingly, as many people know, I have a history of dancing ballet professionally, but I always kept ballet and psychology separate. And when I brought them together, it was bringing the psychologist in me to the ballet world. And it's only more recently that I've brought a restorative movement program to the NIA project. So the incorporation of the arts has changed over the years. Um, we We've added all of these community gatherings. We have a Black History Month event every year. We have a Thanksgiving celebration where we all come together. We're doing a domestic violence awareness movie night next month, all together. And all of those things grew over the years as our sense of community grew. And then the final thing is that I think that our focus at the beginning was sort of helping people stabilize and then work through their trauma and heal. Um, but really, the sense of helping people re-engage in the community and live lives based on their own values where they could really flourish, that wasn't part of the program early on. And so we have a community empowerment group now where we really focus on empowering people to move into the community, do volunteer work, maybe get jobs, uh, get involved in furthering their education. And so this sort of community engagement piece has
Mhm. Mhm.
totally been added in more recent years.
So Nadine, if you would permit me to get a little more personal, I experienced you as a person that's very passionate about what you do. And I think anybody listening to you or hearing you talk
Mhm.
realizes that. What was it that do you think that drew you to this work? What keeps you going with it? Because it's demanding, it's hard, it's challenging. Sometimes I feel it's very lonely. What tell us about like how you evolved as a person and a therapist over your lifespan? And I mean, a lot of people probably know your mother's a prominent psychologist and family therapist, to an author, and I actually did a book in her series with her, and so a lot of people know about the work here. But what was that like as well, having like a famous mom who is a force tour de force in of herself?
So those are two different questions. They might
Yeah,
be related, but
pick
they're
easy, go with
two
whatever you want.
they're two different questions. I'm happy to address both of them. I'll do the mom question first, and then I'll do the passion question. So there were lots of advantages having a mom who's a psychologist. She got her doctorate when I was in elementary school. Nobody else's mom had a doctorate back then. I learned about psychology and family therapy and family psychology from a very young age. I went to classes that she was teaching, and I took notes in the second grade class, and I wrote Freud at the top, and then I wrote superego equals mommy and daddy, ego equals me, id equals my feelings and impulses. And the impulses was not spelled correctly, but this was in third grade. I went to that same class and I wrote Skinner at the top of the page. And underneath it, I wrote, I like that Freud man better. So,
That's
so I had
crazy.
my opinions from a young age. So
Yeah.
I got a lot of exposure. Um, and
Was she inspiring for you? Like, did she inspire you?
absolutely, absolutely. She
Yes.
loved her work and she's very energetic and,
Passionate.
passionate. I got to go to conferences when I was a kid, and honestly travel as her career took off internationally, and
Yeah.
learn about psychology in other countries. And then it was really kind of hard to find my own voice in psychology because I was constantly my mom's
Mhm.
child. I would go to APA meetings and people would say, "Where's your mother?" And, "Oh, I saw your mother over there," or, "You're not like your mother," or, "You are like your mother."
Yeah. A
And
lot
so
of
a question,
differentiation. A lot of
so
differentiation stuff going on.
right.
Mhm.
So a question like you asked, if I had gotten that question, 40 years ago, I would have been like, "Oh, what am I gonna?" And now there was a tremendous amount of differentiation that I had to do professionally as well as at a time where I was doing it
Where you're
personally.
differentiating. Yeah.
And so, the first time I was president of a board of a division of APA, my mother was the council rep.
I remember. Yeah.
And I just remember my mom and somebody else, another person who went on to be president of APA, disagreed with me about something. And I just couldn't even begin to hold my own in this conversation. And it was hard. So, but I moved through that. She moved through that. We moved to a very different place. And I remember her saying when I was APA president that she felt like she was back at being my mom in ballet because now everybody was asking her, "Where's your daughter?"
Oh,
or saying, "Oh, I saw your daughter over there," and that there was this sort of shift that occurred. But there's really been an equalization that's occurred. And so, um, now I can appreciate all the gifts and am grateful to have had an amazing role model and my parents, both of them, being wonderful role models, and empowering me to be a leader, both of them.
mhm.
So that's what I'd say on that part. In terms of the passion for the work, um, there are several things. The women in the program have just been so inspiring for me.
You get a lot out of
Out of
seeing
helping
their
when
courage and seeing
yeah,
their resilience and
yes. And
yeah.
when we're struggling, being there with them, we have a 24/7, 365 crisis line, and I handle that crisis line, except when I'm out of the country. And
Wow. So
so
you're on call all the
I'm
time?
on call 24/7, 365. And we prefer actually that I get called first before 988, because I know people, right? I know
Wow.
their stories, or I can get their therapist. I can
That's
get them.
quite a responsibility.
People call, everybody's a suicide attempter, but when when they know they can call, when they know they can connect, they feel like they have some control, they actually call less than if they don't have access.
Yeah, yeah.
And so, we have one person who on one of the big Grady Hospital billboards that says, Grady saved my life. But if you listen to the TV spot, it's Nia saved her life. And, she's gone on to be one of our patients that was most suicidal and made the most suicide attempts and struggled the most, to somebody who has really made a difference in the
So
red zone.
you turned your own adversity of losing those two patients early in your career to now actually saving people in ways that maybe you would have been inspired to do. That's really like
Absolutely.
a
And
cool
so
story.
far, we've never lost
Wow.
anyone, Leah, to death by
Wow.
suicide.
But because if you really look at the ingredients, to
It's
success, then you've not. I mean, you've got the core, but you've used that and you've expanded it
right.
to
Right.
much larger in terms of just meeting all the needs, many of the needs of the people. But I had a question for you, Nadine. So, are these the participants? Are they still Black, or do you have you expanded given the diversity that we're seeing that's occurring in the Metro Atlanta area? Well, downtown. I mean, uh,
Right.
DeKalb Fulton County area.
So 100% of the participants in the research identify as Black women.
Mm-hmm.
Um, about 92% of everyone who receives services in NIA identifies as a Black woman. So for some of the clinical services, um, we have expanded those. And that's pretty consistent with the demographic breakdown of the hospital in terms of race, ethnicity.
Mhm.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Mhm.
So, given the challenges that you are seeing now, in terms of the funding, any changes or that you thought process about, where do we go from here with this? Because certainly it's a successful program, but I know you can't help but have some angst and think about, well, how do we pivot, right? Given some of the challenges that are occurring in the world right now and with the funding.
Yeah, so I'm very concerned about that at lots of
Mhm.
levels. One is, what is the Medicaid cuts going to mean for the women in the program, and the other sort of benefit cuts that are going to happen, and
Mhm.
just how much harder their lives are. And we have a hardship fund, if somebody's going to lose their lights or something like that, but we certainly can't support everybody who starts having more and more
Right. Mhm.
struggles. And so I'm really worried about the impact of all this on the lives of the women in the program. And yes, very concerned about our ability uh, to, to continue to get research grants, for sure, but
Mhm.
just more generally, as there's a shutting down of DEI. I'm
Mhm.
very worried about a program that has been all about DEI and all about
Mhm.
access and cultural responsiveness and humility. And and things like that are becoming harder and harder to sort of keep online and stick with. And I'm really clear about our values. My values aren't going to change, and I'm going to continue to fight to do what I think is best and right. But it's I've never been worried like this before.
So Nadine, seeing the challenges that you're hearing about the challenges that you're experiencing and we're experiencing in our country, what as you look forward, what do you see for our field in terms of not the challenges, but some of the potential solutions to the fact that so many people don't have access to care. Some of the research that I've been digging into actually shockingly says that 40% of psychotherapists do harm. That we talked before the program about how many people are trained in one kind of manualized treatment, and they do not have the flexibility or the fluidity to go farther, and that for complex cases, which seem to me are getting more complex as I've been in this field. If you could just tell us about, from your vantage point, being so tuned into what's going on in the field from so many different perspectives, what do you see now as we are some of the challenges and then maybe some of the potential solutions?
I mean, I think we all have a sense of what many of the challenges are. I mean, our nation's values are changing, and that is trickling down in lots of different ways, whether that be funding or even what you are allowed to call yourself. Or I know that my title is changing for my role, but I don't even know what my new title is going to be, because Emory on September 3rd did away with all DEI programming, but I've been the vice chair for DEI. So, I mean, I think that there's profound impact. I think that AI is going to change things a lot.
What do you see there, like in terms of the power of AI and how that can benefit us and how that might actually be a detriment to what we do? What do you have a sense of that?
So, I mean, I think that there are some people that the only treatment they would get is AI therapy. And so I think when we talk about access, there's a group of people that wouldn't go to to somebody like me or any of you, but that would talk to an AI therapist.
Just because there's not going to people aren't going to fund it, like it's going to.
Well, or they don't want the kind of connection with some of the intimacy and things like that might come. So I
And some of
think
them want the ease of AI. It's just right there at your fingertips.
it's
Right.
there 24/7. It's
Mm-hmm.
just like our crisis line. Um, and I think there's some exercises and homework activities. I mean, just like many of us are finding some use for AI in our, day-to-day lives that can be integrated. But I had an experience a couple months ago. We had a 3-hour continuing ed workshop on the use of AI in psychotherapy. And so I was kind of reflecting on that and thinking about that. And then one of my more junior colleagues wrote to myself and another senior person and was very concerned about the presentation and basically felt like we just shouldn't be supporting this. We shouldn't be doing this. This is, we're throwing
Mm-hmm.
away who we are and what we stand for. And I didn't have time to respond to that because I needed to go give a talk at Emory. I went, got out of my car and was walking through the hospital. And I saw a patient of mine who I'd seen the night before, somebody who doesn't like to be at the hospital because their wife had died at that hospital a couple of years earlier. And they looked horrible. And I'd never seen them look like that before. And I, I, I know it's not what the ethics code would say to do. Their head was down. They were on the phone. I knew they didn't see me, but I had never seen them look like that. And I called their name, and they looked up, and I said, are you okay? And this is somebody I'd never had any physical contact with before. And they walked over and they fell into my arms sobbing. And it turns out now their second wife just got a very serious diagnosis. And they were leaving the hospital to go pick up their kids from school. And as I reflected on that after my presentation, I thought, you don't do that with your AI therapist. And your AI therapist doesn't know you walking down the road and saying, I'm going to do something that the ethics code may say is a little gray area, but this seems like the right thing to do.
There's nothing gray about that.
I didn't think there was anything gray about
Nothing
that
gray
either,
about that.
Nadine.
And it was this sort of moment for me, like, I'm going to do, as long as I still have that kind of connection with people, I'm going to do this work.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
when I can't have connections like
yeah.
that, I don't
Then
know
stop.
that there's a
That's
place for
exactly
me.
Yeah,
right.
I agree. But so what I'm really thinking at this point is that what's going to happen is that the AI therapists are going to be relegated to the people that can't afford clinical care. And that I'm really worried that the first line of therapy for people who have insurances first see the AI therapist. I think we're going to get more of a stratified level of care that the people that can pay out of their pocket are going to come and see some of the more experienced therapists who have a lot of education and training. And then there's going to be like as we talked about, the technicians who do manualized treatment. And then there's going to be people who can't afford any of that, or their insurance won't cover it, or they don't have insurance because it's going to be cost effective to have an AI. I'm really worried that that's going to be the case.
You know, this is really interesting. I mean, for me, I'm seeing some of that right now in terms
Yeah,
of
yeah,
the access to care and who gets the care because
yeah.
the online treatment programs are, what is the
Well,
virtual programs
even some of the like the
right.
BetterHelp and so forth
Yes,
that
and I didn't want to call out the name, but that's what I was thinking about.
So
yeah,
And
was I, but
that's the
yeah.
beginning of it, right?
Yeah.
So it makes it okay so you can take it to the next level. And now the next level is AI, right?
yeah. And that's
Well,
and we know that's going to happen. And then how do
Mm,
we what kind of challenges is that going to create to people who their only experience with mental health care is with an
right,
right.
AI therapist?
I think that gets partly to the larger question that you asked, Jeff, about what do I see us doing about all of
right.
this? So, that's something I've been struggling with a lot. Um, and I had the humbling experience of being invited to and attending President Carter's funeral. And got there, we all had to get there very early, and people in the cathedral talked to each other, and went up front and saw where all the former presidents and first
Hmm.
ladies and second gentlemen and whatever were going to be sitting. And then there was about an hour uh, of time where we were in lockdown and silent when President Carter was moving from the Capitol, the rotunda, to the cathedral. And during that hour, I reflected on the people who were sitting in that room, the people who were sitting in the front of the room, the people who would have been there if they were still alive, like Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and just kind of reflecting on the people there, and reflecting, of course, on President Carter, who I personally knew better than these other people, and what they did at really difficult times. Because I thought maybe I could learn something from them. And so when I thought, for example, about President Carter losing the election, I was like, well, he didn't spend his life trying to fight what was happening. he was really clear in what his values were. And he created a structure and an infrastructure in our country and around the world to wage peace. And he knew what his values were. And he didn't go to war about those values. He kept them front and center, and he did good things. As Congressman John Lewis would have said, our former congressman, he got into good trouble. He did good things in alignment with his values. And so for me, I feel like what we need to do as individuals and as professionals and as a profession and a discipline right now is be really clear on our values, stay true to those,
Uphold them.
and uphold them, and
Yes.
find ways we can do that without
Yeah.
getting fired,
Yeah.
without getting
Yeah.
all of those other things. I'm not
Mhm.
recommending people do that, especially, most of us still need to make money. But to use the models of the people before, and whether that needs to be the underground way of moving things forward, or whether that can be the more public ways, or everything in between there. There's going to need to be lots of different ways. There's not going to be one right way, but we need to stay together. We better hang together, or we're going to hang alone. And we need to be really clear on those values and stay true to them.
No, I think that's beautifully said. As a profession, what do you think, as mental health professionals, researchers, what do you think we can do as an important intellectual sort of body that
So since we're talking about psychotherapy today, I mean, to me, and I would guess to all of us, but I'll just speak for myself, the therapeutic relationship is really important. There's lots of research that shows that the therapeutic relationship is really important.
Right.
I
well,
think it's got,
that's what keeps me going. And I mean, the
yeah,
letters I get from people that you changed my life, or
right.
what you did. I mean, it just what I get back is so much more than I give.
Right.
Really
Absolutely.
is.
Absolutely. And
Right.
so I think we've lost a lot of that in school. We have lots of trainees that didn't really, whether it's the, evidence-based relationships they didn't learn about, or whether it's the therapeutic alliance, whatever terminology we want to use about this, from whatever model we come from. And I think we need to really keep that front and center, and
The
really
power of
the therapeutic
engagement,
relationship.
the power
Yeah,
of attunement, the power of
connection and
being in the room with
collaboration.
Right.
people. You
And the
can't really
difference,
get that anywhere,
right.
maybe with your spiritual leaders, but I don't hear of anyone that gets that hardly anywhere. Families are moving so quickly. It really is a sacred space.
Mhm.
And the difference that makes
Yes.
in
Yes.
how
Even
in
one
right.
even one time with someone,
Right.
one session sometimes, just that experience of having someone who is so attuned, can be so attuned and so present.
That listens,
Absolutely.
and they're connecting with them,
Yes.
and they're saying
Mhm.
without saying, I hear you and I
Yeah.
understand.
I heard this story
Mhm.
once about someone
Right.
was asking a rabbi, like, what do you do when you have to go to when people have these tragic losses or they lose somebody and you have to go and minister to them? What do you do? And
Right.
and he said, I sit with them.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Right. Right.
And
Right.
that really struck, like, I don't try to say it's going to be okay. I don't try to, I sit with them. I'm present and I give them space to feel what they feel.
Hmm.
Right. I noticed that Denise asked a question here and talked about the community and ties to the community, and I really appreciate you raising
Oh, good. Yes.
that, Denise. And what I want to say and what I haven't mentioned so far is that we have a community advisory board, a very actively engaged community advisory board, which includes current and former members, but uh, community members with lots of different relevant lived experiences, um, and do indeed have strong ties to the community. And so I couldn't agree with you more about that. I would also say that we have um, begun to work on having a peer supporter join our team. And I think that is another way to kind of work with the community of individuals with lived experiences. We've supported several members in the getting their peer supporter training as well. And so I think you're right. We recently, I guess last year, we had an event at Ebenezer Baptist Church, which was, of course, Dr. Martin Luther King's church, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s church, and is now where Senator Raphael Warnock preaches, and for suicide awareness in the Black community. And we're members of the NIA project. It was a digital storytelling event and shared their stories of struggle and of suicidality and of interpersonal violence and of resilience and strength and hope. And so sort of embedded in the community in those ways. So I appreciate you raising that, and we could definitely do better with that. And we've always had a strong connection with the community. So really important point.
So I want to just distill all the wisdom that we can from you while we're with you in this short period of time. So you have been like an amazing leader in all kinds of different ways, and building the NIA project and shepherding that. And tell us more about like some of the qualities that you think. I hear, your engagement with your community and so forth, but what other qualities can we, like, if we could suck it out of your brain, what are some of the qualities that you think leaders have to work on or have to have the kind of effect that you have had in your career?
To make the difference that you've made,
Yes,
Well,
Nadine.
thank you.
I really appreciate you both saying that. And I think there are lots of different ways to be a good leader. And I think in many ways we have to capitalize on our own strengths and lead in ways that build on who we are. So every time I take one of those leadership tests, whether it's the Myers-Briggs or the Berkman or whatever test it is, I always end up the most feeling leader in the group of leaders.
I can see that.
And so they'll stick all of the people who are, green, which is feeling, in the Berkman in the corner over there, and all the blue people who are this kind, the reds over there and the yellows, and I'll be the only person in the green corner. And I'll be standing there by myself. And I think at the beginning, when that's things like that would first happen, I'm like, well, I got to
What's
learn
wrong
to be
with
like
me?
one of these kind of leaders. And that's just not who I am. And I think
Right.
part of it is embracing, I lead with more feeling, I lead with more emotion, I lead, and so, but that's not how other people lead. And
But you are saying that one piece of wisdom is to embrace the qualities that you have
absolutely.
and use them as your leadership
Yes.
style.
Yes.
And I think that what's unique about that with you, Nadine, is that that drives your passion.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how you continue to make the difference in spite of.
Yeah. And so, I think for me, embracing your strengths, I think being authentic is really important in whatever ways that is. I I don't see another way to lead but being collaborative. I think you can, it's valuable to be visionary, but you can't be out there on your own with some vision and other people aren't part of it and you're like dragging them along or they're fighting
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
It's like collaboratively. I'm more interested in sort of collaboratively
So
creating
how do you do
vision.
that though? How do you like how do you get people to participate in the vision? Like how do
Well, if
you
they feel like their voice is really going to be heard, they can make a difference. I mean, I look at these groups we have on the NEA project. I wouldn't have come up with half these groups.
really?
Not have even come up with 2/3 of these groups.
Wow.
And it's really other people having, having input.
Mhm.
And then something that I developed much later in my career as a leader is courage. And I didn't used to think of myself as a courageous leader. I'm not really sure that I was one. Um, but sometimes you're in leadership roles where what you have is courage and integrity and values and just being really clear about those and living by those.
Yeah,
And
so courage, integrity, values, that's a good part of a leadership package in my estimation.
mhm, mhm. And then finally, sort of just like we have to capitalize on our strengths, we all have our leadership challenges and recognizing them and knowing what they are. And on the one hand, sort of using those as growing edges. And on the other hand, owning them and having a team around us that has strengths that we don't have because none of us are going to be good at everything.
That's right.
So, and so whether you're building a program or leading an organization or teaching psychotherapy, I think there's a lot of, or honestly, being a psychotherapist.
Yeah,
There's a
so
lot.
let me swing back to an earlier theme that we're talking about. It's back to psychotherapy. Um, you're um, you were saying that the therapeutic alliance, the therapeutic relationship is key. Can you talk more about like how you understand the whole manualized treatment movement and the RCTs and then the relate just in your like you've been immersed in this for decades. Just give our people that are watching sort of the your take on RCTs where there's horse races between different approaches and then just tell us following manualized treatments and then the self of the therapist and all that's good stuff. What sort it out for us?
So I can't do that in 7 minutes, and I'm not sure I can do that in 7 months or 7 years. But that
Try.
said, I have a few thoughts about that. One of the things is I'm an integrationist, and there's a lot of reasons I'm an integrationist.
Mhm.
But one of the reasons is that I had a mom who was a family systems thinker. I had an analyst who taught me to be psychoanalytic. I had an undergraduate and graduate school advisor who were as CBT as they come. I got trained to do randomized controlled trials. I've done more than my fair share of randomized controlled trials. I've shifted to more hybrid efficacy effectiveness trials. But as an integrationist, I don't have to do a horse race. I don't have to pick between these. I can find a way to say, I incorporate strategies from
Mhm.
manualized treatments. I try to deliver them in a way that fits who I am and what the particular patient needs. Um, but I see value in that. And I think it, to me, any of these things too dogmatically or too rigidly
Yeah.
isn't going to work.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I think you're talking about is that a lot of this has to do with the match between the therapist and the patient and approaching the patient, but also clinical decision making because there's so much that we have no data about. We make hundreds of choices in each session and with techniques, with strategies, with relational principles, and there's really no data on most of it.
Mhm.
How do you understand the art of clinical decision making in terms of how do you do that in your computer, in your brain?
And I have something to add to that. So, Nadine, and I also know the population that you work with primarily. Are you finding with everything going on in the country and the world that there's more severity in terms of what you're seeing that comes into your practice? And how do you integrate
Good
all of
question.
that with what it is that
Yeah.
you do?
Yes. So there is definitely more severity because there's more stress. I mean,
Yeah,
we know
allostatic load
that
is
people,
tremendous.
we know, right, we know that people have less money now, and the cost of things is going up, and the discrepancy between the two is bigger. We know there's more gun violence right now. I live in a community marked with lots of violence, and so absolutely people are impacted. So, one thing we added several years ago to create space for that in the NIA project is an open process group. And every week we have an open process group and people can come in and talk about the latest thing in the news. And we didn't have a group for that. And quite frankly, when I went to grad school, I was taught that you keep politics out of psychotherapy.
That's right.
Politics weren't part of psychotherapy. Nobody taught me how to bring politics into psychotherapy. So the thought of having an open process group where people in a therapeutic community could come together and talk about
Hmm.
the latest news um, just never even dawned on me. And so it's a big part, but we embrace it. We
Hmm.
we acknowledge it. That doesn't mean everybody has the same views. We can have respectful discourse with people having different views. But we have a place and a community um, where people can talk about what's going on in the world and how it impacts them
Mm-hmm.
and how they're worried it
Mm-hmm.
might impact them.
So you're not ignoring what's going on in the ecological sphere. Like we don't talk about
No,
that stuff. It's
no,
like
I
pretty
mean,
absurd.
if I take a biopsychosocial cultural
Right.
Yeah.
perspective, just like I need to deal with the genetics of people's bipolar
Yes.
disorder, or schizophrenia spectrum disorder, or depression,
Yes.
or what undergirds their post-traumatic stress disorder or complex PTSD or whatever, I also need to look at the cultural context,
Yeah,
which in which
exactly.
they're embedded, I'm embedded, how those intersect. I'm obviously not a Black woman. I need to be sensitive to my power, my privilege, um, differences that we have, and then ways in which we have common humanity, um,
Mhm.
Hmm.
and hold both of those.
So in the 2 minutes we have left before we end our recorded session, what would you say to the new therapists who are just entering this field? Like, is there any piece of wisdom that you'd want them to take away from this, like with what you know and what you've experienced? Like, people are just getting into this. What would you say?
So I love being a therapist. I love doing psychotherapy. I love creating therapeutic programs. And I would say find your way forward in doing the psychotherapeutic work that really engages you, that's meaningful to you, that brings you pleasure and a sense of purpose, and go forth with that. And you're going to change all of those things over the decades. The way I practice now is really different than how I practiced when I was starting my career, in part because I've changed, and in part because the field has changed and the world has changed. And we need to
Hmm.
keep up with that, and we need to be willing to evolve and transform. And I kind of feel for myself that when
Hmm.
I'm not able to do that anymore is when I need, that would
Mhm.
be an indicator that it's time for me not to do this work anymore.
Well, it's a privilege to have spent time with you, and it's wonderful to be able to end our series with a truly eminent psychotherapist, Nadine. And um, I want to also thank all our previous guests who offered their expertise and knowledge, and all our co-hosts that joined us along the way and helped us make this a great program. So this is our final program. Thank you all for watching. Make sure you watch the recorded versions, and Godspeed to all of you.
Thank you
Thank you
so
so
much,
much.
Dr. Kaslow. Thank you so much, Jeffrey, for doing this. We
Yeah,
appreciate it.
I
It's been
really
fun.
appreciate
It's been
it.
a fun program.
Thank you so much.